Hey everyone. I see that room is muted, but I just thought I'd say I'll be up there in a couple minutes. I had a plumbing catastrophe while getting ready, but I'm
Oh, okay.
Kevin, we're waiting for Mary. She's on her way out.
okay. I am too.
All right. Sounds good. We're ready to go. I'm going to take a peek at the agenda here. City Manager, thank you, everybody. Councilor Bonington Mary is here, so we're going to get started. Be in when you're here.
Okay.
So this is the meeting about the meeting of April 14, 2026. Got the entire city council here. Councilor Bonington's virtual for a few moments and he'll be in the room. And then we've got our city attorney, Kaylee Klein, John Williams, city manager, Public Works Director Derek Leyes, and Morgan Lovell. Remind me of your title. Support Services Supervisor. Thank you. And with that, you can get going and jump into the agenda. Approval of the agenda. I would like to move the appointments to next week's meeting, if that's possible.
Do
Council's okay with that?
special meeting next week
Yeah.
to appoint.
Except right now we don't have anything on that agenda, and I was going to propose canceling next week, which is a work session anyway.
That's okay.
So
Okay. Well, then we can,
it would be the only
Was that
topic
in the
as
hopes
of
of
right now.
moving things, like having more time?
a little bit more time to get more applicants for some of the boards and also just have a little more time to dive right in because that can be sometimes a little bit of a discussion.
We can do it in
among the
May.
City council. We could do it first meeting in May and get folks into the positions.
The only administrative timing thing with that is that Ashley Dugal will be here at 2:15, so if it pushes things up, we may have to wait on the first agenda item.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Hope not.
So that was the only thing on the mayor's council reports, the only change I had to the agenda, and then we'll move to consent agenda. Any questions on that item?
No.
City council, no. Meeting minutes, no changes to the meeting?
No.
And then we go into the business meeting. So I can turn it over to John. You have any
Thank you, Mayor.
opening thoughts?
Well, 3 items on the business agenda with a purposeful order to them. The first is the resolution considering whether to delegate the council's authority to a hearing officer on the operations and a land use appeal. We'll have myself introducing the report. Ashley Dugal will be here to provide context and address any legal questions that you have. But if you have any process questions for me and Kaylee right now, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, we'll present the substance at the meeting.
So you don't want any affirmative defense of the geological report?
Under this agenda item, I think probably not.
Okay.
Question, thank you. Any other questions on that?
I just wanted to clarify so we're all the councilors on the same page that Ashley will be here in person. And also check your email feed. She's responded to some of the questions you may have had, and she'll certainly present that orally too. But just to give you background, Counselor Bonington. If you haven't seen that yet, I would go ahead and take a peek.
I have.
That's all I have on that one.
Sounds good. And then moving to item B,
Item B is the early work package. Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin?
that was your. you had
Oh,
to-
that was, okay, sorry. Sometimes it's hard to tell. The early work package contract, once you have made a decision about your role in the land use appeal, then you can talk about the early work package contract. Eric and Morgan will be presenting. They'll have experts with them. We expect there may be some discussion of the geotechnical question. We'd be happy to talk about it then. Under this item, as you know, this, as we talked about this in detail last week, so don't need to talk about too much here, except to say that it has a lot of implications for timeline and cost of this project. We're hoping to get the council's approval, if you're so inclined, on the stage that we can move forward with the project. But we will be able to answer technical questions, process questions, cost questions, all of that at the meeting.
And if there's questions that you know ahead of time that you may need to research in the next,
As I like to say, in the next 20 minutes.
we're happy to take those.
Okay.
We're prepared to discuss the press release, geotech, schedules, all the good stuff.
Any questions anybody wants to put on the table that might need staff research beyond what we've already
Well,
shared individually?
My analysis of the article, I mean, there were a lot of flaws in it. One word, devastating landslide. It looked like there was a 6-inch gap. It's a long way from devastating. And lastly, it was basically seemed to be cherry picking from the original reports, and there was remediation work after that, further analysis. So it doesn't really reflect the current situation.
I think that agenda item is a perfect place to have that discussion if you want to share some of the feedback on that article.
Okay.
And staff is fully prepared to pull from the various geological studies going back to the 60s to the 90s, the internal ODOT memos that reaffirm the stability of the site, and our own internal professional licensed engineer that has provided reports. I think there's a really important distinction between memos and licensed geological professional geotechnical surveys of record. And I think that's a really important distinction that we're happy to talk about in the meeting.
I like
The narratives of 30 years ago have been essentially replaced by a study that was done 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and a lot of the background information from those, such as the 1991 memo that was included in the internal ODOT memo, was a memo. It was not a licensed stamped geological technical report. And that memo itself states that the observations of the slide, there has been no movement, that it was buttressed, that it remained stable. And that narrative has actually been continued with all subsequent reports. And the only licensed stamped geotechnical engineer reports we are aware of on record are those done in the last 3 years. The other ones are memos stating generalizations and assumptions with very clear disclaimers stating that they are not geotechnical investigations, and any further study should be done by a professionally licensed geotechnical engineer, which the city has done.
Yeah, I like the idea of distinction, for instance, the difference between a geologist and a geotechnical engineer. And not everybody knows that. And when we hear geologist, and I'm not dissing geologists, I know a lot of,
I would expect
Hey.
you not.
so, and also just relying on these Dogami hazard mapping. It says right on the Dogami site, they're not to be used for exactly what they're being used for, basically, by this article. And people who are referencing the Dogami, they're not citing that it says that it's site-specific investigation. This cannot substitute for site-specific investigation. So,
And that is true for also for our wetland maps. There is a disclaimer within our own GIS.
yes, I got that off the
Yes,
cities.
that they are also not legally surveyed engineered maps, and they're informational only. They're meant to lead people to provide and investigate further with licensed professionals. We're not meant to make legal binding decisions.
And so just for my process for these agenda items, I plan to have the city manager introduce the topic, and then we'll take public comment. And then through the public comment, there could be some questions raised, and at that point, we'll bring staff up to address any questions from the council. And I know you're prepared to address the geotechnical things and that nature, and then we'll go into our own deliberation. So.
Awesome. I would definitely save the commentary though and the engagement on that piece until item, is it B or 2? Like first
6B.
focus
Yeah.
on whether you want to delegate, and then on the next
Yeah.
step, you can get into the facts.
Thank you. And then we have any other questions on that? Put out there for staff read. All right.
Return of the Lady B is item C. Again, was from the work session last week and business meeting that you can make a decision if you're so inclined to do so. And Kaylee and I will be happy. I'll present a brief version of the staff report since you've just been through it extensively last week. There's only a couple of things that changed, and I'll cover those. I am not certain, but I believe Patrick will be present. I expect they will. I'm just not sure who yet.
Oh, good. Thank
And that's the end of the business. meeting.
Jim said he'd be there.
you.
It agrees with you.
Well, seeing any other final comments or questions? Got about 15 minutes to migrate upstairs, eat some dinner if you have to eat. And then
Couple it
be
in.
adjourned. We're adjourned, everybody. We'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you.
I know. No, I think so.
I did. So you want me to, I was there for all of the time and part of that.
All right. And then you'll remove item 4B from the agenda. Not ready.
Do I have to say when?
No,
Say
next meeting, next meeting.
Next.
Maybe to the next meeting.
Okay. Say it again, 4B.
Yeah, well, that's for appointments.
Okay.
Okay, you ready to go, everybody? All right. Testing. Okay, thank you. Well, I will call to order this meeting of the Westland City Council. It's Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. And we'll begin, as we always do our business meetings, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody could please rise and face the flag. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And as always, first item of business is to approve the agenda. We have one modification to move the community advisory group appointments to the next meeting of the city council. So entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the agenda for the April 14th, 2026 Westland City Council meeting, removing item 4B to the next meeting available.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move agenda item 4B to the next meeting available. Any discussion? Council? Seeing none, go ahead and call the roll, please.
Counselor Bonington,
Yes.
Counselor Bragg,
Yes.
Council President Baumgartner,
Yes.
Counselor Groner,
Yes.
Mayor Wieloszowski.
Yes, thank you. So the motion passes, the agenda is approved. And now we turn to public comments of a general nature. So I understand that several folks have signed up tonight to speak on a couple of our agenda items later. This is for general public comments for items not on the agenda. Do we have any?
Luke Borland,
Luke, you're wherever you'd like. And are you here to speak on an agenda item or just look, would you be okay waiting till we get to that point? Okay. Nice. I don't want to jump the gun. So that's all. Okay. Well, that takes us then to mayor and council reports, and we do have our land use attorney is on the way and should be here around 6:15. So if we get to the hearings officer question, first we may take a brief pause while we wait for that person who helped with the staff report. That's just letting the public know if we get there early. With that, on to mayor and council reports. Reports from community advisory groups, city business in general. Councilor Bragg.
I didn't have any meetings, but I did participate in the wine walk in the historic Willamette area on Saturday. There was quite a crowd. We were lucky and got a break in the weather, and it was a lovely event.
Thank you, Councilor. Council President Baumgartner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended 2 meetings yesterday for the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area Coalition, the Management and Operations meeting and the Legislative Committee meeting. And I was very excited to have us discussing some upcoming events that I hope people will put on their calendar. The one notable one that stands out to me is the Lamprey Festival, which will be June 25th, and more information to follow on that, I'm sure. And I was also really excited to see for the tribal representatives and tribal individuals working together and conferring from various tribes that have been having differences of opinion about the falls. And so I'm really excited to see collaboration moving forward on that. And last night I attended the Lady Bee fundraiser hosted in the Wilsonville McMenamins. That was very fun and a good cause. And I saw a lot of our folks some are here today.
So thank you. And that's about it.
Thank you, Council President. I have had no advisory group meeting since our last meeting, so I have no report tonight. Councilor Groner?
Yes, I have fond memories of last year's Lamprey Festival. Good food, good music, but no special meetings this week. Thank you.
Let's see, there was a Parks Board meeting last Thursday, but that was mostly just getting to know the acting director that we have, John Lagarza. Not much came from that, other than bringing him up to speed on many of the intricacies of the department and the Parks Board and all the passionate work those folks do. Also, the Sunset Neighborhood Association meeting was last Wednesday. And I would say the only thing of interest there was the Sunset Picnic was scheduled for August 23rd. So mark your calendars.
Yes, I
Thank
attended
you for
the
that.
Sunset meeting as well, and Officer Rollins was also introduced to the group.
Awesome. Glad you got to see Chief Rollins there. With that, any other burning items that folks would like to report? Okay. Well, then we can move on then to the consent agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve any objection to any item on the consent agenda. We don't have discussion under council rules, but we could remove something if anybody feels strongly about that. Okay. So but please make a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the consent agenda for the April 14th, 2026 Westland City Council meeting, which includes the March 10th, 2026 meeting minutes and the contract amendment to the Operations Complex Owners Representative Extension and additional budget.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda for the April 14th, 2026 Westland City Council meeting, which includes the March 10th, 2026 meeting minutes and the contract amendment to the Operations Complex Owners Representative Extension and additional budget. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Counselor Reich,
Yes.
Council President Baumgartner,
Yes.
Counselor Groner,
Yes.
Counselor Bonington,
Yes.
Mayor Bilastowski.
Yes. Thank you. So the consent agenda is approved. And of course, Kathy, thank you for your work on the meeting minutes. And with that, we've reached the business meeting, item 6A, and still waiting on Ashley Dougal. At any moment, she should be here.
Yes, the city's land use council from Barry Eldner is en route. She should be here in about 5 minutes, which was consistent with the original agenda. So maybe a 5-minute recess.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So anybody has anything they'd like to do to fill time for you? Would you like to talk about framing our future, or we could do that? Okay. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Well, then we will take a brief 5-minute recess and get back on track in just a few minutes. Thank you, everybody. And welcome to all members of the public who are here. Some of whom I'm seeing for the first time. Glad to welcome you to the council chambers. We're in recess.
Get some smooth jazz to lighten the mood during this recess.
Loud enough as well here.
It's just kind of embarrassing. I think that was strange. Okay.
The hearings officer, they might come back up again.
How big?
No, they're, they generate something. Some general.
Yeah. Whatever you return to your.
That's
I love it. As far as presentation, we just need to know it's false. So, yeah, that's no problem.
No,
Whatever your experience. I can do
Legal back.
I was planning if I was gonna do it Tuesday, every day, and then questions. And if they have, so I don't think they read it, I'm supposed to get that, read it. And then if they have, so it's like, hey, so maybe. That's great. That's what I was trying to do. I just sent it.
Okay. Well, we have our esteemed legal counsel here, and looking back at our TV guy, Kevin, ready to go? Okay, we'll get back on the record. I'll call the meeting back into order. And the first item of the business meeting is the Agenda Bill 2026-1403, which is Resolution 2026-03, delegating the City Council's appellate jurisdiction over the Planning Commission's decision on the Operations Center project to a hearings officer. And I know we have several public comments tonight, and we've got two separate Operations Center decisions. So if folks have signed up for Agenda Item 6A, that's the hearings officer resolution. And then Agenda Item 6B is the Operations Center contract amendment about the early work package. So if you'd like to comment on both, and you can just, I might ask that after we get through the hearings officer resolution, I'll ask the audience if you'd like to comment on the other item, just to make, because some people only filled out item 6A, and you might want to give comments on the Operations Center project. So that's how we'll go about that, in case you didn't fill out the form with both items. So with that, Mr. City Manager, would you like to introduce the topic, and then we can take public comments?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. Yes, I'd be happy to. Ashley Dugill, our contract land use attorney, will be assisting on this one and doing part of the presentation. So the question tonight is, does the council wish to delegate your appeal authority over the Planning Commission's decision on the operations complex, with the file number given in the staff report? The Planning Commission has made a decision to approve the operations complex, and a appeal has been filed by the Savannah Oaks Neighborhood Association. We're here tonight to discuss your options in terms of process moving on from here. And so Ashley is going to present the legal background and the options for you.
Thank you. So as as was said, you basically have two main options. You can either delegate your authority to hear this appeal to a hearings officer, or you can hear the appeal yourselves as the city council. So those are your two choices here. Staff is recommending to delegate your authority to a hearings officer. You are authorized to do this per essentially state law and your charter. Your city charter provides broad authorities to city council to act on all matters that are vested in the city as a whole, and is not expressly vested in another entity per state law or per the Constitution. And so as long as it is not expressly stated elsewhere in your code or in your charter, then you may delegate authority. That includes your quasi-judicial authority to act as a body and also your administrative authority to act as a body. A common example of delegating administrative authority is, for example, when you create a committee or a commission, there might not be express authority in your code to take those actions, but you are still permitted to do so by the broad authority that is provided to you by your charter. Similarly, you are authorized to delegate your quasi-judicial authority when you're making quasi-judicial decisions such as this one upon appeal. So there is a definition in your code for a hearings officer, but there's no express process by which to delegate authority to a hearings officer in this sort of situation. That means, because there's nothing express and there's nothing expressly prohibiting it, that means that you are expressly authorized to do so. So there is authority to do so, and it is recommended by staff to do so, primarily because this is a city decision in the first place. It's a city application. And in order to avoid any sort of potential future conflicts or any sort of appearance of bias, it would just be simpler for council to potentially just remove themselves from this process and delegate this decision-making authority to a neutral third party.
Thank you for the overview. Any initial questions, or we can have some questions or comments after the public comments? Sorry, I didn't public comment. Okay, we can proceed to public comments on agenda item 6A. So this is for the hearings officer issue, then we'll get into the operations center next.
Ed Schwartz?
Mr. Schwartz, welcome. And we have received your written testimony as well. Just to state your name and city of residence, and are you here in your individual capacity or on behalf of your neighborhood?
I'm here just in my individual capacity.
Sounds good. But given the amount of speakers, I'm going to try to keep it a little close to 3 minutes. So
Oh, sure. Yeah, no problem. I practiced. I got it.
that sounds good.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank-
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. My name is Ed Schwartz, and I live in West Lynn. I urge you to make the right choice and hear the appeal of the city operations complex yourselves. Do not delegate your authority to a hearings officer. Doing this would be a disservice to the city and residents you have promised to serve. Up to this point, you have authorized the project to move forward, budgeted up to $45 million to pay for it, and helped select the location. Now you are suddenly unwilling or unable to keep an open mind and hear the residents' objections to the project. The City Council is elected by West Lynn residents to deliberate and sometimes make difficult decisions on matters affecting the residents. This is one of those times when you need to do exactly that. Abdicating that responsibility is not why you were elected. The residents of West Lynn deserve a decision from the City Council as to whether this project should proceed in the currently designated location. You're considering using a hearings officer instead of hearing this appeal yourself because you approved the funding for the project. This is not a direct conflict that would prevent you from hearing the residents' concerns about the location of the project. That is the primary issue that you would be deciding, as there is already consensus from residents that we do need a new operations complex. Our city's code allows using a hearings officer for various decisions, such as appeals of building officials' decisions, decisions made regarding a customer's storm drainage account, a person challenging an expenditure of system development charge revenues, and others. Our code does not mention using a hearing officer in place of the city council in any circumstances. In his memo to council regarding the use of a hearings officer, City Manager Williams states, quote, "The city council is vested with all powers of the city that are not expressly provided to another party or otherwise reserved by the Oregon Constitution," unquote. This sounds suspiciously like the pleadings of the current administration in Washington, D.C., which wants to reserve for the president any powers not explicitly denied by the U.S. Constitution. As we have seen, this could potentially provide the president with broad new powers. I contend that Mr. Williams' statement does the same for the city council. I do not believe that the council can claim for itself all powers not explicitly described in city code. To do so would upend our system of government. Please make the right decision tonight and choose to hear this appeal yourselves as the residents of West Lynn elected you to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Roberta Schwartz.
Mrs. Schwartz, welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you.
State your name and city residence, and you have up to 3 minutes.
He's always a tough act to follow. My name is Roberta Schwartz. I'm speaking this first time as a citizen. I will be speaking later as a neighborhood association president as well. So I will be testifying tonight in two parts because the city council drastically reduced the amount of time that citizens and neighborhood associations are allowed to speak in front of them. I will be testifying both as a West Lynn resident and a Savannah Oaks Neighborhood Association. This time I'm speaking as a resident. Tonight, the City Council is going to discuss whether you will perform one of the most important tasks you signed up to do when you became councilors, and that is to render a decision on a land use appeal. The Savannah Oaks Neighborhood Association filed this appeal of the operations complex. The alternate to the city hearing the appeal is to shirk your responsibility and delegate your responsibility to a hearings officer. I encourage you to hear the appeal and not delegate your responsibilities to a hearing officer. The cost of hiring a hearings officer for this case is estimated to be $4,000 to $9,000 and would be paid for out of the City Council's budget from the general fund. The idea of the hearings officer in West Lynn came up in 1995 when Jill Thorne's administration passed Ordinance 1375 of the Municipal Code and added 6 codes of the Muni Code. But you won't find those Muni codes in West Lynn any longer because they were revoked. The use of hearings officers to make important land use decisions ended soon after August 2001, when the David Dodds administration amended the code with Ordinance 1474. Changing the appeals process was looked at again by some people on this current city council. On November 4th of 2024, they directed staff to find information about how 9 jurisdictions in the metro region handled their land use appeals. Only Tigard was found to be using hearings officers for these appeals. It was determined that using hearings officers will have the greatest impact to city costs in processing an appeal. And the con list that was developed included 2 important items about using a hearing officer for land use decisions. It compressed the public's time to review a potential proposal, and it may require the appellant to secure a land use attorney. Given the above, I encourage you to hear the appeal and do not delegate it, because you'll be delegating your responsibilities to another person. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Roberta Schwartz, you stay up for the Neighborhood Association.
Hey, welcome back. It's been a while. Now you're speaking on behalf of your neighborhood?
Correct.
Okay, we've set the timer to 5 minutes, and just state your name and neighborhood association and go ahead.
My name is still Roberta Schwartz. I still am a West Lynn resident, and I am the president of the Savannah Oaks Neighborhood Association, very proudly representing those folks. There has been no ordinance passed by the current council that includes what is being suggested tonight, the hiring of a hearings officer. So tonight's resolution 2026-03 is being hastily proposed to allow the city council to relieve itself of the responsibility to hear this appeal of the operations complex. The proposed operations complex was labeled in an April 11th, 2026 front page Oregonian article by investigative news reporter Max Bernstein as a $45 million gamble. Please see the appeal on the side. Is that Oregonian article why you want to try to back out of your responsibility to render a decision on this particular appeal? The City Council is governed by procedural code, overseen by the Department of Land Conservation and Development. With this resolution, you are effectively amending the comprehensive plan, which is a land use regulation. A land use amendment must go through a process. It must go through a PAPA. A PAPA is a post-acknowledgement plan amendment. By amending, you are changing the land use procedures on an ad hoc basis. You cannot do this on the fly. Oregon ORS 197-610 through 625 states, before a local government adopts a change, including additions and deletions to an acknowledged comprehensive plan or a land use regulation, the local government shall submit the proposal to the director of the Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD. In all cases, the proposed change must be submitted at least 20 days before the local government holds its first evidentiary hearing on adopting the proposed change. And ORS 227.178.3a states approval or denial of an application that was complete when first submitted or deemed complete pursuant to subsection 2 of this section must be based upon A, the standards and criteria that were applicable at the time the application was first submitted. By trying to use a hearings officer, you are in effect changing the goalpost. Please do not pass this resolution. You need to do your job because the people expect that of you. They pay you to do it, including a recent raise that you received in your compensation. There is no legitimate reason for you not to do so. You have stated in the past that you can remain neutral, making decisions in land use decisions. Do just that for us, the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Bill Rellier.
Well, she called Bill Rellier. Bill, welcome back. And just state your name and city of residence, and you have
Yeah, good
to 3
evening,
minutes.
council, members of the public, staff. Bill Rellier, City of West Lynn. Members of council, I think this is a very important matter that deserves your attention. And I also believe that it deserves at times assistance from third-party experts to help make decisions when we ourselves don't have the expertise to be able to fully define the subject matter and help us arrive at the best decision for the public. You know, there are just way too many pieces of the puzzle that are missing in this land use application that are just now being brought to the table, such as the waiver of indemnity that the owner of the land prior to the city's purchase asked the city to sign. In all my years of buying real property, I've never been asked to sign a waiver of indemnity for geological impacts that could potentially pose hazards to the next purchaser of that property. You know, why would the state ask us to do that if they didn't know that there were risks involved with building on this property? So these types of things lead me to believe that the state is trying to take precautions, they're trying to indemnify themselves, but to what extent? Well, liability would only be for the amount that they purchased that we purchased the property from the state for, which is around $360-some thousand. The other $44.7 million that we're going to spend to build this facility would then rest on the public. And so there's a huge risk here, and I think it deserves the full attention of the council and possibly the formation of a committee to review this matter and help the council reach the best decision. So I appreciate your time on the matter.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Former counselor. Next.
Terry Cummings.
Another former counselor. Welcome, Ms. Cummings. Just state your name and city residence, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Terry Cummings, resident of West Lynn. I'm coming here before you to talk about the two options to consider about hearing this appeal. The first option that says council has the authority to hear and decide an appeal of the decision is correct. West Lynn's Community Development Chapter 99 authorizes the city council to hear land use appeals. However, this option is the only legally valid choice. Option number 2, to delegate the authority, is invalid because the mere definition of a term cannot supersede or alter a CDC ordinance. For example, Municipal Code 1.100 defines what a hearing officer is, but does not indicate how or why a hearings officer might be utilized. When it comes to land use, CDC Chapter 99 clearly authorize who may decide land use appeals. The provisions of Chapter 99 do not include a hearings officer. Santa Claus can't do it either. Furthermore, the wording of West Lynn City Charter Chapter 6, distribution of powers, which was referred to in the staff report about the charter for some reason, does not mention or pertain to a hearings officer. Although Charter Chapter 6 states all powers of the city are vested in the city council, that does not mean council has the power to quickly pass a resolution to revise CDC code as a matter of convenience in order to avoid having to hear an appeal. None of the following CDC Chapter 98 criteria can be met by merely passing a resolution. CDC Chapter 98 is procedures for decision-making. It's a very lengthy chapter. I have a couple pages that I've written about, and it's in the record for you. I don't think I'll have time to go over all of it, but I ask you to please look at it and notice that none of the criteria was met. You didn't give proper notice. You didn't form LCDC. You didn't do a public process before changing the codes. This is essentially changing a code. In summary, as a reminder, you swore to support the Constitution and the laws of the United States, the state of Oregon, and our city charter and the ordinances of our city. Those are our laws. Now that you know that City Council has no authority to bypass city code by passing a resolution, and if you truly want members of the public to have confidence in the fairness of a final decision on appeal, you will refuse to delegate your authority to a hearings officer hired by the city manager to make a decision for you and the rest of us regarding this critically important matter. We're depending on you to do the right thing.
Thank you, Ms. Cummings. Thank you for your comments.
Patricia Foster.
Welcome. Hi, Ms. Foster, is that correct?
Yes.
Hey, welcome. Just as,
Just keep it short and
Oh,
sweet,
you're-
but thank you all for being here.
could you just state your name and city residence for the record?
Patricia Foster, and I'm a resident of West Lynn, have been for a long time. And I can basically just say ditto, I mean, to everybody, except for one comment that I do not understand how anybody can even consider thinking about building something on land that has been proven to be landslide dangerous. So I just have shown up to show up and say that I'm trying to pay attention to what the community that I'm in is really concerned about. And thank you all for doing your job. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Michael Capagan.
Another former counselor, Mr. Capagan, welcome. Welcome. Just state your name and city residence, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, my name is Mike Capagan. Live in West Lynn. 25, I want to let you know these remarks were prepared before, so there's some repetition, but I want to just read from what I've prepared. 25 years ago, I was on a newly elected city council, and one of the first things that council did was act to remove the position of hearings officer from the West Lynn Community Development Code, the CDC. The council that I was on at the time directed the Planning Commission to have hearings for code changes on Chapter 99 and Chapter 98 of the Community Development Code. The Planning Commission did that, and later that same year, the City Council, after a series of meetings, amended the CDC and distributed the various duties and responsibilities of the former hearings officer position between the Planning Commission and the Planning Director. If the City of West Lynn now wants to reestablish this position of hearings officers into the CDC, there is a clear precedent for how to do this. Direct the Planning Commission to hold hearings for amending the CDC. After the Planning Commission makes its recommendations, the council can have a hearing and amend the CDC to create the position of hearings officer with that position's duties, responsibilities clearly delineated. I am not in favor of a hearings officer, as I feel their so-called impartiality is essentially an illusion. They are hired by the city and almost always rule in favor of whatever the city planning staff recommends. In any case, the Operations Center application is already vested. It needs to be heard under the provisions of the CDC that existed when the application was submitted to the planning staff. I think the rest of it is just more repetition, so I'll stop there and just add a few comments from my observations.
Go ahead.
One, I think this process is laid out in the CDC on how it's to work. I mean, we've already had the city attorney at the hearing giving advice to the Planning Commission. And one could say, well, why didn't we hire an outside city attorney to make recommendations and give advice? We have a city manager who has interest in this project, and we have a city council who has the goal to approve this project. I don't see why the city council would not be willing to listen to the concerns of this project and make a decision and own it. They've already decided to spend the money to go forward with this project. They should hear what the citizens have to say, listen to their concerns, and either agree, disagree, or mediate in between. But to put that off to somebody that the city manager hires to make that decision, I see that as really avoiding a fundamentally important responsibility that you have in front of you. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you.
Doris Swanson, I was told that you just wanted to turn in a testimony form, but you didn't really want to speak. Okay, I just want to verify. And then that's all I have unless somebody else wanted to speak.
Would anybody else that didn't fill out a form like to speak? I didn't give a disclaimer at the beginning that we have testimony forms if you'd like to speak. Would you're welcome to come on up and just state your name and city residence. This is for the hearings officer resolution. Then we'll have another agenda item for the operations center next as well.
So it's some engineering questions. Would that be the next?
Next agenda item. Sounds good. Thank you. So is that all the testimony for on that item? Okay.
So,
would you like to provide any clarifications or comments?
yes, please, Mayor. Thank you.
And could you just make sure you speak in the mic and speak up? I know sound
Yes.
system's not as good.
I
in here.
will try my best to articulate clearly. So I just wanted to clarify a few points based off of what I heard from public testimony. I don't know, is this better? I don't want to touch.
Turn it up as loud as it can go in the system and then we'll, sorry, just give it a second.
Okay. I can also try to just, project if that helps as well. And that way, if you can't hear me from the mic, you can hopefully hear me just from my voice. Okay, so I just wanted to make some comments about a few of the items that I heard mentioned in the testimony now. The first thing I wanted to clarify, I don't want to be yelling at everyone. Can you hear me better now from the? Okay.
It's good. It's good. Perfect. Good volume.
So the first thing I wanted to clarify was I heard some comments about impartiality, essentially a city council's ability to make a decision on a quasi-judicial action. And I wanted to clarify for council and then also for the public, 2 additional heightened standards that apply when making quasi-judicial decisions, unlike typical decisions that you see a council make in the standard day-to-day decision-making that they actually are doing in front of you. Unlike the typical legislative process, quasi-judicial decisions like this require impartiality, which is essentially no bias. And bias is it's a legal term. It's, we have the colloquial understanding of bias, but we also have a legal definition of bias, which is established through case law. And the appearance of bias is more important than even actually, in fact, being biased. So if there is a potential for bias from the facts and circumstances of a situation, meaning there's the potential that the decision makers have prejudged an application, they are prohibited from making a decision on the quasi-judicial process. And essentially, if there's any risk of a decision maker appearing biased, then we will often encourage them to recuse themselves out of an abundance of caution. And so that is the very situation where hearings officers are utilized, is where, because the quasi-judicial decision-making process demands this higher bar, essentially this neutral third party can step into their shoes and make a decision where legally they are encouraged not to be doing so because of that appearance. So I just wanted to clarify that additional heightened standard for quasi-judicial decision-making that all of the elected and appointed officials are subject to.
Could you just define quasi-judicial for the audience, just because that's a legal term?
Of course. So there's 3 different types of typical decisions that a city council will make. You have legislative authority, quasi-judicial authority, and administrative authority. I mentioned those very briefly at the beginning in the staff report, but legislative authority cannot be delegated. That has to be made by the city council. That is essentially rulemaking. That is like, for example, passing ordinances. Quasi-judicial authority is making decisions on in what's called an order. That is where you have a limited set of facts and a case before you. You are making your decision based off of pre-existing criteria, and you have to make a final decision. And there are limited situations where council will act quasi-judicially, primarily in a land use context. And that is allowed to be delegated, that authority, if it's not expressly precluded by state law or your code. And then finally, you have administrative authority, which is essentially policies and administrative decision-making. So that and of course, there are higher bars for quasi judicial actions because the council is essentially acting like a judge. So I just wanted to provide that additional context for bias. I also wanted to provide some additional context for home rule authority. So that section 6 in the charter is spelling out a legal concept in Oregon, which is called home rule. This is not true in every state, but in Oregon, there is an idea that essentially anything that isn't expressly preempted, meaning already spelled out by state law, by the Constitution, by federal law, any power that's not expressly spelled out in that manner may be exercised by your local government. And so it is a bit of a universal power for your city council. Of course, there are limits on how they exercise that, but that is what that section 6 in the charter provides, and that is called home rule authority. I also wanted to make a comment about hearings officer use over the years and just provide a brief background on that for just hearings officer use in the state in general. Hearings officers were less common in the last 20 to 30 years, primarily just because there wasn't a need as much for them. But in the last 5 to 7 years or so, there have been changes to state law to mandate hearings officers in certain contexts. And not only that, but the complexity of land use in Oregon has shifted significantly to the point where hearings officers are being used more and more by elected and appointed officials to make certain types of land use decisions, most often where there is an appearance of bias issue or local conflicts or an extremely political topic. So it is, although it was less common 20 to 30 years ago, there's a recent trend of commonly using hearings officers. Either some larger cities use them for all land use decision-making, but most cities only appoint if it's a particularly contentious issue. And then I wanted to make a comment on the fixed goalpost rule. That's the statute that I heard quoted. That's ORS 227-178, 3A. That's basically a law that says you have to apply the standards that were in effect when the application was first submitted. Appointing a hearings officer isn't changing any laws. It's just using the laws that are currently in effect. So it's not like you're amending your code midway through and using new standards for your op center that now will apply. It's simply delegating authority that currently exists to a different body who will review the existing laws that were in effect. And then I also heard a comment that you cannot delegate authority because that would violate an ordinance. There is no ordinance that spells out delegations being prohibited, so there is no ordinance that would be violated. I know that was a lot, but I appreciate you letting me comment.
Are you familiar with the DLCD notice requirement? There was some testimony about that the city council would be violating certain notice requirements for rulemaking.
Yeah, so I think those comments were directed at the idea that by delegating authority to a hearings officer, you are essentially rulemaking. And so anytime you do rulemaking, like for example, if you're amending an ordinance, development code ordinance, you do have to go through a really specific process by which you notice DLCD 35 days in advance. That's referred to as the post-acknowledgement plan amendment notice, or PAPA. You also have to do specific noticing of neighbors and go through a public process called the legislative text amendment. But this isn't a code revision, so none of that is required.
Thank you. And I asked a question, happy to open up the floor to other councilors. You have questions for legal counsel? Councilor Bonington.
I think you covered what I was wondering pretty well, but can we just confirm for the record that this would be a one-time situational delegation of authority and not a code revision, not a new ordinance?
Correct. It's a resolution only, temporarily delegating your authority in a very limited scope, simply within the context of this one decision.
Okay. And does it alter anyone's rights or, I guess, change the process substantially for them in terms of?
The only difference to the process would be that there is one hearings officer hearing the appeal rather than 5 council members. and every other element of the process would remain the same.
So all the appellant's rights,
Correct.
all of that is preserved.
Correct.
Thanks.
Thank you. Great questions. Thank you for asking that. Can you just talk briefly again about the requirements of an impartial tribunal or impartial decision-making and bias? Because I want to reference that a little bit in my comments, or avoiding the appearance of bias, why the law favors that in the land use context.
Of course. So again, there's a heightened standard when you're acting in this quasi-judicial role, essentially as a quasi-judge. And there are 3 standards that typically will apply to you ethically. Conflicts of interest, which all of you are used to. Ex parte contacts, which means communicating outside of this setting in the public hearing, and also bias. And bias is highly fact specific. It's decided on a project by project basis, and a judge will determine it by looking at all the facts and circumstances surrounding your decision. And they are typically looking to see, is there evidence that you may have prejudged an application, meaning that you had essentially reached a conclusion about whether to approve or deny the application before you even read all of the facts and details of the decision? Were you trending in a certain direction before you had seen all that evidence? Or was the decision that you made the product of animus, which basically means you had some sort of negative, extreme negative feelings towards a decision? And if all the facts and circumstances that a judge looks at from the outside looking in shows evidence of the appearance of bias, then they can invalidate your decision.
And what would happen if the city council heard, decided we're going to hear the appeal, but then before the hearing started, there were bias challenges to city council members or other things like that, that then city council had to decide, I can't hear the case?
So if you weren't able to hear the case, then most likely the lower decision would stand. So it would be a final decision that was just approved, and that would be the city's final decision. If the council decided to, despite the appearances, the potential appearances of bias, they decided, because it is your discretion, you may choose to continue despite potentially there being the appearance of bias. If you decided to continue to participate in the decision-making process and the decision was appealed based on one council member's appearance of bias, then the entire decision would be invalidated.
Thank you. Any other questions, or should we move into council sharing their thoughts? Councilor Groner, please.
So if the council's decision was invalidated because of the appearance.
Could you turn?
If the city council's decision was invalidated based on the appearance of bias, what would the sequelae of that be likely?
What would the, I'm sorry, could you repeat the end of that?
What would the consequences of that be?
I see. The consequences would be that you would need to start the decision-making process over. There would be no decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and see no other questions at this time. We can move into deliberations, and anybody can share their thoughts. I have some, but happy to open the floor up. Okay, well, I certainly appreciate hearing from the public and the comments that folks have brought in and understand the concerns. My goal really is to ensure that the public has full confidence in the appeal process and the outcome. And in this case, we are the applicant, the city, our esteemed staff have put together the application, and the city council has been involved in the project, in the planning, funding, and overall direction of the project through the last, it's been a council priority for several years. And we've heard from legal counsel that land use hearings have to be impartial. And we're trying to avoid the appearance of bias in what we're doing. So given the involvement that we've all had, I think it's important to avoid that, the appearance of bias, and serve as the appellate decision maker. And I don't feel like it's stepping back from my responsibility as mayor. I feel like it's making sure that the process is fair and trying to have public trust in our process. And so delegating the appeal to an independent hearings officer ensures for me that the matter is reviewed by a neutral person with expertise in land use law. It's a complex record that we have and a lot of complex issues, and I want the decision to be scrutinized. And the Planning Commission's already approved the decision and conducted a detailed review. And I feel like this step would provide an additional level of scrutiny on the process and making sure that the appearance of bias is not part of that. And if the concern is about ensuring a fair hearing, I feel like having an independent person come in is the best way to do that. And I understand that some appellants would prefer that the council hear the case. But given our prior involvement, I feel like an independent review better serves the citizens, and those raising concerns. And I think it deserves impartial consideration. So that's where I'm at on this topic. And so happy to open the floor up to City Council to speak. Councilor Bonnie, go ahead.
Yeah, I largely concur with everything you said there. I don't view this as a potential shirking of responsibility or hiding behind someone else. I think this is a very transparent and appropriate way to deal with appearances of bias. If I put myself out back as a member of the community and not a counselor, this is exactly the kind of thing I'd want to see. So from that perspective, I think this is the most appropriate process to follow.
Councilor Groner.
Yes. While I personally believe I can be unbiased, I can see how a third party viewing the history of my discussions with city staff would have some doubts about that. And so, yes, I think there is an appearance of bias, and therefore I think the policy outlined is the correct one.
Thank you, Councilor. Council President, any thoughts?
Oh, yes, I have thoughts. I have been also studying this issue, and I am hearing loud and clear the message from the public. Although from actually several years ago, I just independently went into the planning staff's offices and asked about the hearings officer process because I had never seen it used in the city of West Linn. Not that it hadn't been, but I just was not aware of it. And while we all are very dedicated and very serious, there's not anyone up here sitting here who I can honestly say in my heart is not totally dedicated, passionate, wants to be transparent and make the best decisions possible. None of us are land use attorneys or subject matter experts in this particular matter. So yes, we do represent the public. We were elected. I am serving with honor and privilege in that role. I greatly appreciate the confidence of the public. But we have to make decisions to the best of our ability. I have been researching, there are most of the large cities in Oregon, as just stated by our attorney on this subject, use land use or hearings officers. And some of the important benefits of that have also already been mentioned, which is independence, impartiality, and a third party that is a professional and trained in every aspect of these decision-making. So I don't want to take the public's contact or input away. I'm not interested in distancing or hiding. That isn't the goal at all. It's to make a thorough review. I'm also concerned at the potential of City Council sitting in decision of an appeal, as previously stated by my colleagues. So I am in support of this particular resolution for those reasons, but I respect the public's input and perspective on the matter also. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Appreciate those thoughts. Councilor Bright, any?
Thank you, Mayor. To avoid any appearance of bias, I am, I am in favor of this resolution. I do want to say that as the Let's try this over here. Maybe that'll be better. As the liaison to the Planning Commission, I saw all of the Planning Commission meetings that were related to this topic. I didn't attend all of those meetings in person, but I was there virtually watching the meeting. So I have heard the comments from the community and the concerns from the community. And again, because of the city itself being the applicant, I feel like delegating our authority to a hearings officer is our best route.
Thank you, Councilor Reich. So with that, any other comments, or we'll have discussion on a motion? If no other questions for legal counsel or comments, okay, you can.
Thank you, Mayor.
make a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution 2026-03, delegating the City Council's appellate decision-making authority over the Planning Commission's decision on Project ID Cup 2502-DR 25-02-WAP 25-01 to a hearings officer.
Second.
Has been moved and seconded to adopt Resolution 2026-03, delegating City Council's appellate decision-making authority over the Planning Commission decision on Project ID CUP 2502, DR 2502, WAP 2501 to a hearings officer. Any discussion on the motion? We've already kind of had the in-depth discussion from City Council, so I appreciate that. Seeing no hands up, we can call the roll then, please.
Council President Baumgartner?
Yes.
Councilor Broner?
Yes.
Councilor Bonington?
Yes.
Councilor Bright?
Yes.
Mayor Wieloszowski?
Yes. Thank you. So the motion passes, and we appreciate all the testimony we received from the public on the topic. With that, are we ready to transition into the next item on the agenda? Okay. Well, then we can move on then.
Mayor, you may want to give just a moment in case some folks are leaving.
Yep. Okay. Thought people might stick around for the next discussion on the Operations Center, but we can continue then on the agenda to agenda item 6B, which is the Operations Complex Early Work Package Contract Amendment Approval. And happy to turn it over to City Manager to introduce the topic. And I know we've got the project team here as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. The next agenda item is a item that you discussed in work session last week. And yes, I'd like to invite Eric and Morgan to come up. Yes, but Mayor, are you going to have public comment before the staff?
Do we have some comments on this topic? Okay, happy to take public
So,
comments.
I will just broadly introduce the topic.
Oh, sounds good.
And then we'll turn it over to public comment. Thank you, Morgan, for reminding me of that. So as I was mentioning, you discussed this in work session last week. You directed us to bring it back for consideration at a business meeting. This is the early work package for the operations site and requires council approval or consideration, at least decision, based on the size of the contract. So we will have our project team present some background information, but first we will hear from any members of the public who wish to speak. And I'm sure, as the mayor was about to say, if you thought you were signing up for both and you want to speak on this, you're welcome to come up and speak under this item, and we can fill out a form or amend your form later. So.
Yes, thank you for repeating my earlier statement. Appreciate that. So with that, we can welcome up our first speaker.
Terry Cummings?
Hi, Ms. Cummings, welcome back. State your name and city residence, and you have up to 3 minutes.
In 2021, you were asked to buy a very questionable piece of property from MoDOT. And I came forward and pointed out that the information you were given didn't really tell you what was going on with that property. The staff report only says unimproved land. It doesn't say anything about the hazards on that property. Now, if you discussed that during executive session prior to making that purchase, you really should have disclosed that. If you didn't, shame on ODOT for not making that absolutely clear to you. What you did know is you could only do one access road, and they expected you to limit what you were going to do there. That seems to be coming out, not that it was clear that night. What we did have at the time was our natural hazard mitigation plan for disaster management. That same property is listed on Clackamas County and West Lynn's maps for landslide susceptibility exposure. This site shows in the very highest category. It's the dark blue dot. In the earthquake hazard mapping, it's in the dark red and orange as violent to severe risk of earthquake hazard. This is not a man-made situation, as Mr. Bonington and his friends are posting on West Lynn community page. It's not a man-made situation. This is the aspect of this property that makes it not a good or safe place to be putting our emergency, all of our staff and equipment locate there. Now, years ago, when I was on the council, the police station was needing to be expanded. And we had a whole site analysis of various options done by McKinsey that showed the pros and cons of each one of the sites. Where was that this time? You've had 5 years to do a site analysis, to look at the pros and cons, the costs and benefits of each of the different sites. Some people might think Oppenlander makes sense. Some people might be horrified. Some people might think that the property back here makes sense. Some people might be horrified. I'm horrified about this one. The conditions that caused that landslide, the slippery layer that's on top of that basalt, 60 to 80 feet underneath everything else, are still there. They're under Salamo. They're in that whole area. It wasn't just caused by dynamite, okay? There's only one road in and out, and it's on that kind of slippery slope, okay? You have had 5 years to do a community citizen engagement process. You could have put up maps, asked people what they think. You could have done surveys. But you didn't. Now, I get this in the mail. This fancy little magazine saying that you're going to want to do some community listening. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for making your decisions and committing us to pay $45 million out of our fees instead of getting a chance to vote for it, like we did for the police station, which would have given us a lower interest rate on the bond and would have given
Thank you, Ms.
given the
Cummings, for your
public the right
comments.
to have a say in it. Thanks a lot.
And any follow-up questions or clarifying comments? And we're going to hear from our geotechnical engineers a little bit later about the concerns with the site and the maps. So appreciate you coming forward.
There's nothing that you can say that will reassure me. This will be on, your name will be on this.
Thank you,
Will
Ms.
be dead
Cummings.
by the time that you will be here and your name will be on it.
Thank you.
Paul Olenjinsky.
Hi there, welcome. I understand you have some questions for the engineers, and we have our team here, and they'll be writing them down too, so they can address it, anything they are able to address tonight.
Sure, sure.
Just state your name, city residence, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and city officials. My name's Paul Olenjinsky, and I'm a semi-retired pharmacist, and I've lived in West Lynn since August of 2011. I've watched the Schwartz family, Bob and Roberta, in the development of the preservation of the White Oak Savanna. So I'm really here in their advocacy for West Lynn, and I think their deep respect for and their thoughtfulness that they put into their work. That's why I'm here today, to support them. Unfortunately, they left. But if they're against this, I think it's worth questioning the plan. So I looked into it a little bit. I'm a pharmacist. I'm not an engineer, a structural engineer, but as my wife pointed out, my father-in-law is a civil and structural engineer up in Seattle, and he does a lot of the same thing with communities up in King County. And so I sent him the pictures that Roberta sent me, and I asked him his thoughts, and today he called me back, and I was just taking some notes. There were restrictions on that property appraisal when that was bought from the state of Oregon, and he was a little concerned about this. And then once you put new and impervious surfaces on there, i.e. roofs, concrete, asphalt, where's all that water going to go? You guys will probably build some storm ponds and for storm water. I'm not engaged as much as the Schwartzes are, but were alternative locations ever looked at? Usually a city will have 2 or 3 locations that they will consider for something like this. But what really concerned my father-in-law, JB, is other state and federal agencies, they showed no interest in this property. And they had indemnified themselves. Why would they do that? The other thing is, of course, he was going off the track a little bit, but he was talking about, some earthquakes that could be far more devastating than the dynamite that they used to construct 205. This would be basically fall under a first responder building. So it would have to have 300% of the strategic loads, unlike a regular building. So hospitals, fire stations, as you guys know, those would have to be able to withstand those loads at 3 times what a normal building could. And then he was also concerned, the planning commission, the geologist on that planning commission seemed to have some really good valid points. And he said no, the state engineer said no. And I would hope you guys would say no on this project too. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments and for coming in.
Luke Borland.
Mr. Borland, welcome.
Thank you. Luke Borland, City of Portland. So my name is Luke Borland. I'm the president of AFSCME Local 350-1. And our bargaining unit includes public works and parks maintenance workers who would be working at the operations center proposed here. And on behalf of our local, we'd like to commend council for their support of this project and voice our support. It's rare for us to come and speak to council, but given some of the comments our members have heard out in public and social media and that sort of thing, we felt we needed to be clear about our stance as those who would be in the building every day. It's disappointing to see comments which implies that city council is gambling with safety, is gambling ultimately with the lives of our members. We do not believe that is the case. We trust the professional expertise that has gone into this project. We trust the transparent public process that's taken place. We trust the in-depth studies, the data, the analysis. There are over 6 studies since 2010 or 2010. We trust in the team that's come together in designing this project and really looking at all aspects of this project. We trust in our membership's over 500 years of collective experience working in the city of West Lynn. And we trust that council will continue to support the construction of this much-needed operations center. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And of course, to all of the members for the service to the community. Appreciate that.
That is all.
Okay. Would anybody else like to speak on the Operations Center? Come on up, Mike. Welcome back, Mr. Capigan. Just state your name and city residence and go ahead.
Thank you. Michael Capigan, West Lynn. I'm a little confused, but if I'm not mistaken, you're on the agenda item that relates to the over $17 million that you are going to approve. And I guess I'm not certain. I would have loved to have been able to hear staff's presentation first, but I did look over the agenda bill just briefly. It seemed like you were pre-approving $17 million for some improvements in the grounds and some rough work being done. I guess I'm a little confused on timing. If there's still a question to the plausibility of this development proposal in the appeal and this hearings officer will be unbiased, isn't there a possibility at least that this would not be approved and this funding would not be therefore appropriate at this time? I'm a little confused on the timing. Maybe it's just once it's approved, you can do it. But it seems to me, because I do believe, as Councilor Groner said, you could be unbiased. You could hear this. You could make the decision. If you choose not to because you feel you have a conflict or bias, I would think you should do that in the quasi-judicial hearing setting. In other words, set your date, make your presentation, everyone look at each other and say, yes, we're biased and we can't hear this, and then take the choice. But it does seem process-wise askew. But at any rate, if we want to pretend that this hearing officer or suggest that this hearing officer is going to be unbiased, isn't there a possibility that he could agree, since it was a 4-3 decision at the Planning Commission? It's not like the Planning Commission was unanimous, hands down, this is a great approval. 7-0, it was 4-3. 3 people did not feel it was appropriate. So it seems to me at least there's a likelihood that the hearings officer, if he were unbiased, could say, no, this project is denied. So I don't see really how you would be going forward with this pre-spending, allocating on the other agenda item where you're allocating, what was it, another $250,000 to the consulting oversight firm. I mean, talk about cost overruns before you even begin, how you go from a $500,000 contract and then add another $250,000 to it. That's not, a significant increase. I get confused, especially on a project that's not finally approved for development. I'm a little confused because I haven't heard staff's representation on how they're going to do it, nor have I spent substantial amount of time reviewing the specific agenda package. But I did have some concerns as that related. So thank you again.
Appreciate it. So appreciate your comments. See, if we had gone forward and heard the appeal and then done this, what you suggested of taking it, maybe we could have heard it unbiased, but recusing ourselves because if the majority of council determined we couldn't hear the case, then the project would have been approved. So I wanted it to make sure under our code, the lower decision stands. So I'm just wanting to make sure that the project gets the thorough vetting it deserves through that independent process.
Sure. And just if you could just also put that in context of approving any monetary commitments going forward. It does seem like a.
And you're raising some good questions about the timing, so I'll follow up about that during the staff report. Any other comments from the public? And Julia Simpson was signed up online, but I didn't see her pop in.
She was, and she popped off.
Okay.
Could I make And add just a note while
ahead.
they're getting settled. I just, Mr. Capigan, I wanted to address that concern you expressed about, you don't have to get up. I'm just telling you some information you don't have to, I'm just. Okie dokie.
Thank you, Council President. With that, are we ready to give the staff report?
We are, Mr. Mayor. So Eric Leiss and Morgan Lovell are here as they have been before. And I think as part of their presentation, you'll hear answers or thoughts on some of the questions that have been raised and some of the, all through the course of this meeting. So Eric, if you'd provide the introduction, I would much appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, councilors, for having us tonight. Eric Leiss, Public Works Director, City Engineer. Before I get into the intro for the early work package, Morgan and I did want to address some of the questions, concerns that we heard from the public comments. One of the things, couple times we heard was about a site analysis. And there was a site analysis done internally, and it was pretty simple because we don't have the property within the UGB, within the city for such a project as the Ops Center. There was another comment about.
Which site analysis? Are you referring to the geotechnical or are you referring to?
I'm sorry, about the property selection.
Alternate site
Yeah.
options? Okay.
Correct.
Thank
yes.
you.
So there was site analysis done looking at alternatives.
Yeah, internally, it wasn't nothing formal. It wasn't published. Like I said, it's simple because we don't have that large enough of a property to procure at a decent price to make the project work. Did you want to add something to that?
I was just going to state that information was provided by the previous Public Works Director, Lance Calvert, during the acquisition of the property. He provided information that for years, staff had been looking at properties around the community for this potential and ultimately landed on the ODOT property. I think it lends and leads into another comment that nobody wanted this property. I think there's an important clarification to be made that ODOT did not initiate a surplus. They did not put this on the open market on their own. In 2017, Lance Calvert initiated the conversation with ODOT, asking if they would consider surplusing this property for this project and for this purpose. So again, it was not an open market thing that nobody wanted. And we also question why another state agency would have interest in building a property or a center within West Linn. So it was a reasonable request with due diligence and lots of foresight dating back to 2017.
Thanks.
Thanks, Morgan. One of the other items we heard was about transparency and why the public didn't have their say and input in this project. And as we stated in a press release earlier, yesterday actually, it's a years-long project. We've been working on this as long as I've been director. Tonight is the 17th public meeting between neighborhood association meetings, council meetings, work sessions, et cetera, that we've had discussions on this topic. So we just wanted to put that out there. Did you want to address anything?
Yes, there was reference to natural hazard maps. And this has come up in other information and appeals in reference to Dagami maps as well, and our own West Linn maps. And I think it's very important to note that all of those maps have legal disclaimers that state that they are not to be used for surveying, engineering, or legal purposes. They are informational only, and they are not substitute for professional on-site investigations, which have been performed thoroughly by the city and licensed geotechnical engineers over the past 3 years.
And Go ahead. Did you have a?
Oh, no, just, no, I appreciate, I think that's an important topic to touch on, given the recent coverage of the site and reassuring the public that we've done extensive analysis and feel confident in
Sure.
the safety of it. So I'd like you to address that. And if you need to bring up the geotechnical engineer, I know he's here, and just talk about what work's been done over the last few years, what's been reviewed, et cetera.
Yeah, we're here. Yes, Eric and I are just going to provide broad information about the geotech reports. If there are specific technical questions, our geotechnical engineer is here to answer them.
I had one more comment to address, Mr. Capigan's about the early site work. Preparation, grading, associated work after receiving planning commission approval is customary and normal as part of major construction projects. This work is of course performed before issuance of any structural building permits. Preparing the site, in our case for this project, preparing the site for this upcoming construction season brings $1 million savings and is the most prudent use of taxpayer funds. If the city were a private developer, they would be granted the same approval. A couple examples recently, Tanner Ridge subdivision, Athey Creek Middle School, Sunset Elementary, all had early work performed. So we just wanted to address a couple of those comments, and if you don't have any other further questions, I can.
Do you want to move into the early work package discussion, or would you like further discussion and clarifications regarding any geotechnical?
I'd like to talk
information?
about that, if
Okay.
that's appropriate. And if you could just, because that's a very important topic that's been brought up by several folks in their testimony. Mr. Callis, is that correct? Hey, welcome. Thank you for.
Najib, Najib, N like Nancy, A like in Apple, J like in Jack, I, and B like in boy. Najib. And last name will be Kalas, Kallas.
Thanks.
No
Now,
problem.
happy to open the floor up to council for questions. Could you just start maybe by just talking through the process that you went through to determine your evaluation that the site was safe for development? I plan to read a little bit from this a little bit later into the record, but this is your summary letter about the geotechnical engineering. But like,
Sure.
how much did you review? What did you do?
Yes, so the site has actually like extensive history. So initially the site was stable slope, but it was man-made landslide because essentially it was simple math. When ODOT worked on the I-205, and ODOT used to be, they had different name. I could pull it out, but it wasn't ODOT, so it was different a little bit. When they did the I-205, they wanted to actually cut into that bottom of the hill. So they ended up actually blasting rock at the bottom. And as a slope, you release essentially the buttress or the stabilization force at the bottom and initiate the slide. So landslide triggered, it got worse because there was a big reservoir on top, the reservoir leaked, water came down. I wasn't there, but my judgment, water going down slope gonna cause more slide. Essentially, they kept chasing down the sliding material up to the top of the hill where you could see it now from Salam Road. And basically they removed all the material. They cut the slip plane, which was described earlier. And basically it's weak material. It sits between basalt flows. They removed the basalt mass, which is slid down the slip material, and they built buttresses of fill. And they lowered the site grade by about 50 to 100 feet. The site is not this slow. It actually was, if you look, project the hill, sloped from the hill down even past 205.
When-
The site geometry changed drastically, and there is a lot of buttresses built on site.
Could you say when this was done?
In 1960s.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So they hired the CH2M Hill geotechnical company. They came and did evaluation during the stabilization. They drilled borings. They installed inclinometers. They looked at the sliding material and they documented what's being done. ODOT did the stabilization and the site sat vacant since that time. And then we looked at it, different company, Geodesign. I used to work at that company, but different engineers, not me, different geotechnical engineer and geologist look at the site for potential developer to put like solar panels on it. Nobody knows why it didn't move forward, but this was geotechnical study for it. We came in as Columbia West. We looked at it recently. I looked at it even when Lance was a city engineer. I did some initial evaluation for the site no exploration, just looked at it. In fact, we have discussion with Lance about specific geotechnical consideration and what is allowable or can be done, what is not. So just to clarify that, and that's all documented in writing, there are records of it. Essentially, then, nothing moved forward, and then we got involved in the project about 2 years ago. We did site-specific exploration, and we did geotechnical analysis, and we looked at different options. Originally, there was ground improvement system for the building, the administrative building, because of the fill. Now the building are moved, they're gonna sit on basalt rock, there is no fill underneath, so they're gonna be on shallow foundation. And I took a bunch of notes. I could go through them quick if you guys would like bullet items from the hearing notes I heard. If you guys are interested, I could respond quick.
Any thoughts?
Unless you have questions.
Oh, well, I just have one question, and it isn't necessarily for you, just so hold that thought for a second. This indemnification letter has been referred to several times that ODOT, apparently it was an internal memo. I don't know if I'm using the right term there, but ODOT recommended they not sell this property, and people are, I think, assigning a certain amount of importance and significance to that. So if we could maybe at some point, it doesn't have to be right now, address that.
I can address that. I have the
Okay.
memo in front of me.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So this memo was an internal memo that was submitted as part of opposition during the land use hearing. The memo submitted was not the full memo. We did our own public records request from ODOT and received the entire package. I'm not representing what the appeal or the neighborhood association received, just clarifying that there was more information. The memo is a geotechnical memo that includes hydrological input from ODOT, hazardous department from ODOT, a legal opinion, and then also cites the 1991 geotechnical engineering evaluation when there was discussion of a new reservoir. So there were various reasons for recommendations, perhaps against the sale. A lot of them was because ODOT was actively using it for material storage. They had possible plans for future solar projects and I-205 projects. The legal memorandum that suggests not to sell it, I think is important to point out that it states that the seismic stability of the landslide has not been evaluated. Extensive geotechnical and geological investigations and analysis would be required to evaluate the stability of the landslide. So again, ODOT is not making any representations in this memo that they have thoroughly done any on-site investigation. Again, they said before any sale of the requested property, they wanted to be assured that the landslide will remain stable and that legal provisions contained in the property transfer agreement will be complete. Again, we agreed to do geotechnical studies before anything was built on it. But there is also, again, a disclaimer in this memo. The discussion of legal liabilities provided in this memorandum is a summary of our understanding and should not be considered professional legal advice or even entirely correct. The 1991 summary from their geotechnical engineering group mirrors some of the information our Mr. Callis has stated already. But it also says that there was a buttress that was designed. No indication of movement is evident. Existing construction records are incomplete and little is known. Since the time of buttress construction, a large number of expensive residences have been constructed immediately upslope. That is Barrington Heights. Our recent site visit found no evidence of recent distress and confirmed that the slide has not moved appreciably since construction. I think those important things to consider. ODOT is, of course, concerned about legalities of transferring a property that has a history that can be concerning. But again, these are generalizations, they are concerns, and they are not based on on-site professional geotechnical evaluations.
There's also a note in the 91 report that states that, because it was ODOT property that our water reservoir is sitting on now that was eventually built. In addition to selling that property, they recommended selling the additional property that included the landslide. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that context. I'm going to ask a couple more questions on the topic of what's been done. Mr. Callis, this is for you, just kind of establishing the record of what works that the city's been done. Did your team look at, you kind of mentioned earlier, prior geotechnical studies from 1969, 2010, and 2013? So you did that?
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, the geotechnical report has big background section. It has a lot of exploration logs from Columbia West, Geodesign, CH2 M Hill. In fact, there was even more exploration done for ODOT. ODOT was going to do a trail at the bottom of the property, which supposedly going to go in the east-west, like parallel to 205. And there was study in their geotechnical boring test pits. We reviewed all this information. There is big background section in geotech report and references actually at the end of the report, what geotechnical documents we used.
And then you did some your own field investigations on the site.
That's correct. So we did the geotechnical borings, we did test pits. We had a CEG certified geologist assist us and support us with the work. We did shear wave velocity, and that's for basically geophysical survey of the site to determine site-specific response. There was a good comment about essential structure. This can count as essential structure. So we did site-specific response analysis to address that issue. That's per Oregon Structural Code. So that's all was done.
And those, I just note, there was in 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. So we spent 4 years going through the testing process. And then the testing included deep soil and rock borings, test pits, seismic refraction, micrometer testing, groundwater monitoring, and laboratory testing of soil and rock samples.
That's correct.
And then what was your conclusion at the end of the process?
So the conclusion is the feasibility of the site for development. I hear broad comments and I have to clarify. The feasibility of the site is based on specific proposed development. If somebody comes and say, we're going to put this building on top of the fill, we're going to say it's not suitable, or it is suitable, but you have to do ground improvement, which costs millions of dollars. When we say, okay, this building going to be put on this basalt rock, which is stable, that's feasible option and an economic option. Same for the fill, and I was misquoted, by the way, just for the record, I was misquoted in writing out there. I'm not going to be specific, but I was misquoted. When we look at the fill, when we evaluate stability, we look what is proposed and how we stabilize it. We just don't say, okay, yeah, let's just do this, right? You have to analyze the proposed development in which we did in our report. So, and I could get more specific if you want more follow-up on it. So.
No, if I may, I'm going to read the last 2 paragraphs of your summary letter into the record. Sure. The building foundations are designed to bear directly on structural fill and basalt bedrock. The pedestrian bridge will be anchored into stable materials using deep steel grouted micropiles where needed. Slopes created for the access road will be internally reinforced, similar to reinforced earth structures commonly used for highways, and are designed to remain stable during both normal conditions and earthquakes. In summary, the project does not rely on potentially unstable soils for foundation support. The major structures are founded on structural fill and rock. The historic landslide materials were removed. The new access roadway provides additional stabilization at the slope, and the remaining hillside will not be disturbed. Based on the investigation analysis performed, the site is considered suitable for the proposed development. And I'm assuming you stand behind those conclusions as a geotechnical engineer.
100%.
Okay. Thank you. I'm happy to open the floor up to any other counselors as well. Councilor Gronin and Councilor Bonington.
Yes, I read we scanned the Columbia West report, and I was very impressed by its thoroughness. Just a couple of questions. There's mention of safety factors in there, and it seems like almost all the safety factors are well past one. Could you say what a safety factor is and what the distinction is between a static and a pseudostatic safety?
That's correct. So for pseudostatic or seismic condition, you typically assign lower safety factor. Typically, there is a code, it's 1.1. For static condition, you could assign higher safety factor for 1.3, and you could analyze for these safety factors. Now, you could actually, if you want to increase them, you'll be more conservative, you can. It's just going to add cost to the project. So you could, so the minimum code says 1.1 under seismic and 1.3 under static. And if you want, as an owner, you could say, I want 1.5 for static or 2. You could ask whatever you want, and we could do it. It's just going to cost more money. So you could go with a code, state-based code, or you could ask for, you know, your own desire as an owner, private or public owner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, could you just describe exactly what a safety factor means?
So essentially what you do, let's say under seismic condition, if the factor of safety is 1, that means the slope could potentially fail. You could get some failure. Essentially, you take the if you want to put it this way, the resistant force into the driving force. If the value is more than 1, that means the slope is likely stable. If it goes to 1, then it's marginally stable.
And this is a worst case driving force?
Correct, yes, because you analyze it both under static condition and then you induce seismic forces into the model and you calculate your safety factor. And typically you need to assign minimum 1.3 safety factor for static and 1.1 for seismic.
And the entire site plan does meet those requirements?
That's correct. If you look at the geotech report, the figure, we ran 3 cross sections for slope stability. We created 3 models. One will be through the main access road, and one will be towards the middle, and it crosses the building, and third one further east. So we analyzed 3 typical cross sections through the site.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bonington, go ahead.
Thank you for joining us this evening, Mr. Callis. You mentioned that at your previous firm, you had reviewed this site for the solar panel project.
Wasn't me, it was different geotechnical engineer and geologist from previous firm reviewed the site for potential development.
Okay. Well, I guess my question is, based on the amount of analysis you've done, is there anyone, I guess, in the world more qualified to speak on this particular site and its suitability for this project than you? And don't be humble. Like,
I'm not gonna pretend I'm the most qualified person, but I could say I could back up my statement with data. I mean, again, you know, I'm not gonna criticize anybody, but when somebody comes and says, "Oh, the site," you know, I mean, I heard the comment earlier says wasn't man-made. Do we have background? If not, I could provide the background. We know why it failed. It's documented by both ODOT, documented by CH2 MHIL. There are documentation. I wasn't there in 1960, wasn't even born yet, but I could say based on the data, there are documentation. So I heard some comments about the site, you know, wasn't man-made, you know, that's one. I heard another comment that the slip material is still there. This is not supported by the background information. There was good comment about the war, storm war, because the site gonna become hardscape. That's a very good question and comment. And this has been addressed because the site drainage is gonna be controlled. So we're gonna, you know, there'll be created hardscape, concrete or pavement, but the water gonna be collected and it's gonna go to a treatment system. It's gonna be disposed of. There are no open ponds proposed on site and no infiltration on the slopes on the site, just to clarify.
so it's safe to say you have the most extensive understanding and familiarity with this site of probably anyone.
Yes, I would say we have decent background. You know, again, my involvement with the project been for a few years, and I reviewed information back to the 1960s. You know, we spend hours and hours on the site.
Yeah, I'm sure. Have there been any other projects you've been involved in that are similar or have similar locations that we might know about?
I actually did Salama Road, the slope down, that's new cut in the trail. I actually was a geotechnical engineer just by 10th Street intersection.
Okay.
So when you come up slope, this slope actually was modified a few years ago with Harper Huff, was civil engineer. So I assisted Harper in evaluating the slope and the cut because they proposed the new cut setback, and I was the geotechnical engineer for it.
Okay, great. Anywhere outside of Westland then?
You name it. I mean, we work on projects on landslides. I mean, I could give you not necessarily just me, but some of our firm engineers, like we have project in Seaside. It's actually school, and there's landslide on top of the school. And we're working on stabilizing landslide. I mean, your option would be you evacuate the school, you demo the building, you go build new school, or you use engineering to deal with the issue and stabilize it. So you could do it either way, but the cost will be different.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
Council President Baumgartner has questions.
Well, I cannot avoid noticing and recognizing that in order of chronology, there was a group of citizens who were concerned about the history without any specific actual historical data, just the stories of the observations. If one goes up and down Salamo or just looks with their eye without training, it might appear that there's a 180-foot slide happened. Now, a geotechnical engineer or someone else who's knowledgeable would correct maybe the record, but without that, then people just come to their own conclusions. So as this decision was advancing, I believe what next happened was media became involved because concerned citizens then presented this information to the media. And there was, of course, history able to be found. So could you maybe share I don't want to get into too much of this. And honestly, it's a little bit whack-a-mole because to chase around all the different false information out there isn't really serving the purpose, but maybe because you have a practiced eye, you could spot a couple of significant factors maybe of correction. And I think you just mentioned a moment ago that you were misquoted. I'm interested to know what you were misquoted about.
The description of the site condition or the stabilization, there's a difference between saying the site area of the site is not stable or the site is stable and we need to install some fill and we propose this engineering solution to create fill slope, stabilized fill slope. So I just want people to be careful in the terminology they use because it makes a big difference. If I say the existing material is not stable versus actually stable, I'm just building material on top of it. I want to make sure I use this technology or this engineering solution to make it stable. There's a big difference between the two. So people have to be careful. I mean, luckily I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to use medical term in any means or provide advice, but I advise people to ask or pay attention to whatever, is there. And I actually tell people always read the geotech report. It's probably public information by now. Anybody can read it and, so but to your point, that's a good comment because essentially, I think the issue was aside because it had a landslide history. Everybody thinks about it. Really, our concern is, okay, we had landslide, but we have to see what's the current condition. So even ODOT, they didn't drill any exploration or borings, to my knowledge, where we drilled in the proposed area after they stabilized the site. So there was, to our knowledge, no exploration. We went and did the exploration before we drew any conclusion about the suitability of the site.
Thank you for that. I also just briefly wanted to touch on one piece of history that I think because it's difficult to pin down, maybe isn't given as much attention, but you mentioned it, which is how much did the leaking reservoir actually facilitate the slide or exacerbate this slide in 1969? Because although it's referred to separately almost as there was a crack in a reservoir, it was leaking, but nowhere did I really see a connection made. And I've made enough sandcastles. I'm not a geologist or a geotechnical engineer, but I know if you add water to substrate.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Again, I wasn't there. I could give you my interpretation as just a judgment. You could see the head scarps. The top of the slide actually happened to be where it was the Willamette Reservoir. It's not coincidence in my opinion. Otherwise, this hill could keep sliding up. Where are the new houses now? It stopped at some point. And in my opinion, or I believe, I'm gonna say, obviously leaking water into the slope, 100% will destabilize the slope, will reduce the factor of safety. Because you get saturation, you enter that into your model, and your factor of safety goes from 1.3 to 1 or 0.9. So definitely, the slide triggered at the bottom, it was progressed upslope, and it was a planar slide. It wasn't circular slide actually, because it was two basalt material sitting on a slope slipper plane. So as the masses start coming down, there's just successive failure. And when it got up to the Willamette Reservoir, it cracked and leaked, and water came down. And I think by the time it was too late. It was because of traffic. So,
Thank you.
I think what you were getting at was what I saw, what it was stated, that the only quote marginally stable area is the land beneath the proposed access road. And that that kind of could lead to an inference where the whole site is unstable, but that is not what you
but this
were
is not,
intending
no,
when you said that.
correct. This is not accurate. What
And you're quoting
we
what
said
here?
Potentially,
Okay.
it's not the area underneath the access road. What is we proposing a fill slope, and we need to stabilize that fill slope so fill slope is stable. So it has nothing to do with, we cannot just say the area under the access road is not stable. This is not accurate. Just to put it in a plain, engineering term, it's not accurate statement.
And the rest of the site, buildable site, is stable.
That's correct. We evaluated the buildable portion of the site. That's correct.
Okay. Thanks. I think that's what you were getting at. I heard about that. Thank you. Any other questions for the, Councilor Bright, go ahead. We haven't heard from you very much tonight, but welcome back to the conversation.
I just want to say that we have heard a lot of people's opinions. Even on the Planning Commission, there are people that have worked as geologists, but a geotechnical engineer is a slightly different thing. And I know that you talked about using engineered fill on the road, which is designed to stabilize. So it's not, you're just not going to throw a bunch of rocks there and pave it. And also looking at, historically in 1969, there were different thoughts about how to deal with land movement, whether it was earthquake or anything else. And a lot of technology has come into play in the last 50 or so years. When we see major earthquakes around the world, in places like Japan, you don't even really see very many buildings that fail because there's technology now that can help them be more resilient. And I think from the design of the building, the location of the building on basalt, the engineered fill to make that road, if we have a Cascadia subduction earthquake, that might be one of the only roads in the community that survives because many of the roads were built long ago. So, and I like to listen to and rely on the advice of professionals. And I appreciate the actual field studies and work that you have done at the site.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And just to clarify, like, God forbid we have an earthquake, there will be some damages. Like, if somebody gonna pretend everything gonna be 100%, no, you will get damages. But the difference between shallow material or crack or a house half sheetrock crack versus a house collapsed is totally different. In fact, Lara, now private developers, they design for non-collapse. Essentially, you could decide for, you could design for like zero damage. It just, the cost, the engineering, the analysis, the economic doesn't support that. So they design for non-collapse, meaning we could do some repair, patch some walls, it's fine, but I don't want to pay up front instead of $40 million, $200 million for the project. So just to be clear for even the public, typically all these things mostly designed for non-collapse, but there could be some, curb might crack or something. It could happen. You're going to see it everywhere. God forbid if you have one. I happen to be originally near Turkey, and Turkey had a huge landslide, and you probably guys read about it. I went to a presentation. It's, some structures just cracked. They didn't collapse, right? So.
Thank you. And thank you for being here on short notice today. I know Eric called you earlier today and you came out in person. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no.
Any other questions for Mr. Callis?
Oh, I don't have a question,
Okay,
but I just want to make
go ahead.
a comment. Yes, I just wanted to thank you too for being able to come here and share your expertise and knowledge with us. I highly value all of what you've said, and I've also gone back into the record and studied some of the past contributions. Maybe you weren't there in person, but your expertise was being referenced. So I think we have a really good history of diligence with this project, and I really feel good about it. I also would like to just add that it's our responsibility to make difficult decisions that are sometimes unpopular, and I understand fear. So I understand that. And people are quick to jump onto a message that is a little bit Chicken Little, the sky's falling. It's easy to say that. And then, so I'm wanting us to just take a beat and listen to your technical expertise and rely on the science behind it. And so I appreciate all of that. And I'm grateful that we have it. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Council President. I couldn't have said it better myself. With that, should we move on into the contract amendment? I have to say though, I'm really proud of the team that we've assembled as a city with Skanska as the contractor and Columbia West as the geotechnical engineer and HHPR as the civil engineer. And who else do we have? Klosh Group as the owner's representative and our staff. And I just feel that this team knows what they're doing when we're talking about this project. And I have a lot of confidence in the work that's been going on. And so just wanted to put that out there to the community.
I appreciate that. We're very proud of them too, and happy that they're on our team and are doing great work. So we appreciate them. So real quick, I got a little bit of a narrative on the early work package, and then Morgan can get into a little bit more details. The city's operations complex has achieved significant progress since its original kickoff in February of 2023, when council awarded the preliminary design contract to Scott Edwards Architects. Since that time, the project has progressed through CMGC construction contract award to Skanska USA, final design with SEA, budget allocations, and land use approval. At the time of the award, the pre-construction services to Skanska USA on June 16th, 2025, council was notified that a future amendment for the construction services would be presented at a later date. So here we are tonight. This early work package will provide limited scope authorization to facilitate early procurement and construction services of selected materials such as concrete and mass plywood panels, structural steel, and a prefabricated metal building. Also included in the package is earthwork. We talked about the road building, water and sewer, storm utilities. All work will be performed under a site development permit issued by engineering. Advantages of the early work package are reduced material escalation and supply chain volatility, secures fabrication and procurement for long lead items, establishes early site access, earthwork during a dry weather. I mentioned that earlier. Our value engineering effort along the way through the project design established $1 million savings in getting in there in the dry weather, and maintains transparency of budget while building permit review progresses through our other city departments. Go ahead. My last thing is just about the money and the motion to approve.
Okay, thanks. So yes, again, this early work package is limited in scope. It is not the final guaranteed maximum price. That will come back to you at a later date. This early work package allows for limited scope. And then once that limited scope is carried out, there will be a budget reconciliation. We'll look at what is spent, what has been done, and then the additional construction and material activities surrounding the vertical builds will be reconciled and be brought back to you for final budget approval. We are tracking to stay within the allotted $45 million budget. We are diligent on that budget, and we are meeting constantly to review alternatives that are meet or exceed what we need for like structural compliance. And we have some, things we could add if the budget allows, and there's things that we can take away if are necessary. So we are very mindful of staying within a budget while producing a quality lifetime building that will serve the residents' needs. We've emphasized how important this building is, how important operations are within the community. Fortunately, I think there is a broad understanding from the community that this building is essential and it is needed, and we do appreciate community support on that note. If there's any questions specifically about how the initial GMP works or what could possibly happen should the initial GMP contract amendment not be approved, implications to schedule and pricing, we could address that, or I can just go into it. How would council like to proceed?
Could you address that issue,
Sure.
what happens if we don't move the amendment forward
We
tonight?
are on a very specific schedule. Approving the initial GMP allows us to move forward with the site development, as Eric indicates, which captures a dry weather window, which saves the city money. So if that's moved into wet weather, that immediately potentially can eliminate up to $1 million in savings. There are other information. The initial GMP has been competitively bid on certain components, and then some work is being self-performed by Skanska and their excavation partners at Kaufman. These assumptions of when the initial GMP contract will be approved triggers when that work can start. And it allows Skanska, who's doing those bidding, to carry out current market pricing for those trades. And it anticipates timely execution of early procurement packages. So if that does not happen, then those bids can expire. There can be escalation. It can go into an unknown market. There's no promises on what those prices look like beyond what has been currently bid. And so it is important, not just to the schedule, but in transparency of price and assuring we know what we're paying for at this moment in time. It also can impact the later GMP because it's a trickle-down effect. Early work package and that reconciliation impacts the later competitive bidding for the final GMP. Those are all sequenced together. When you push one out, it pushes out another. And again, that creates uncertainty in the market and can change the bid values that the city's receiving. Also, with a lot of construction, people become unavailable. So, I mean, there are certain expectations of when work is going to be performed and when things are going to get bid. And if you move into different seasons, some contractors that may have wanted to competitively bid maybe have another project. Those are all just unknowns. It could swing either way, but this provides a lot more certainty of pricing and schedule and getting into the building as we've indicated we want to. And it's the most prudent, conservative way to move forward. And it's staff's opinion. It's the most fiscally responsible way of moving forward.
And my other question is just, we had to have an active land use appeal. So how does this relate to the land use process? I can see that some public might feel like, oh, you're approving this. If we approve it, there's impacting the appeal.
I can generally speak to that, but Kaylee, I think, can also highlight it. I think Eric touched on this. It is not uncommon for these developments to move forward with site work during an appeal process. Staff and our project team has strong, unshakable faith that the original land use decision will be upheld. We have a strong, complete application that is rooted in compliance with the Community Development Code. And we are confident that whether it went to council to a third neutral party or even up above that, that our original land use planning commission decision would be upheld.
Yeah, I heard that question come up earlier from a member of the audience. And as Morgan and Eric have alluded to, it is legally permissible to move forward in this manner at this stage that staff's calling the early work package. In fact, that's customary and normal after receiving a planning commission approval. We don't see the city as the applicant very often, but if you put it in the context of a local developer receiving a planning commission approval, they do get started right away on obtaining necessary permits, buying materials that will be needed in the future, doing site grading, even if the decision is on appeal. And that's legally permissible because you need, I can see why it could be confusing, but it's two separate buckets. You have engineering and building type permits, and you have the land use appeals process. And so all of the work that staff has mentioned to you today in their proposal, those will require engineering permits and other permits like those that are required by the state. You'll see in the packet, there's a 1200C permit, which is required for grading purposes, and that's all related to this early work. And it is not limited because the decision is on appeal. So to be clear, there is no legal risk. There is, of course, financial and optical risks going forward with this type of work. You know, if the decision were to be reversed, we would have expended those funds. But I think staff has been very clear and careful in evaluating actually the benefits of going forward now, saving over $1 million based on the dry weather season and also with the really volatile market, being able to lock in prices now, that actually the financial risk in their weighing is in favor of starting early. Also, I did mention the optical risks of it being confusing and seeming like you're going forward when you haven't heard the decision on appeal, but there isn't a legal prohibition to doing so, and developers often do take this approach.
Thank you for that overview. It sounds like it would save the city. You know, we're balancing a lot of considerations, public input, costs, and risk in managing a complex project. So I think to me, it makes sense to save the taxpayers' money where possible while respecting the appellate process that's going to play out. So that's where I'm at on the issue. And any other thoughts or comments from council?
I also picked up on that concern. We've gotten some emails too over the last few days, just specifically about that aspect of going forward with this work. And not everyone is well-versed in the processes, as you have just outlined, and it's actually legal. And again, I would just have to say that our whole goal is to be transparent, to make good decisions, to protect our communities, the taxpayers' dollars, to uphold our fiduciary responsibilities. That is what this council has, as far as I've ever heard anyone speak on, that's our goal, our mission. And we need to provide this facility for the community and the employees and the city's best interest. So I feel really good about moving forward. And I'm basing this on feelings and facts, not feelings. So I appreciate all of the information we've been getting from staff.
Yeah. I could also add that the appeals process to now hearings officer, now that you've made your decision to delegate that authority, I think sometimes it's also confusing. We think of appeals in state court or in LUBA as very lengthy. I suspect now that you've delegated that authority, the city manager will work to hire a hearings officer very quickly, and that hearing date can be set within about a month or so. And so I suspect you'll have a decision rather soon, as in like the next probably 6 weeks to 8 weeks. And so it's not like we're going to be waiting for 6 months or a year on appeal like you normally think when you hear that term.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from council?
I would be interested in, at some point, hearing a little bit more about the detail because we've not done a hearings officer process. And I think especially the community would be interested in hearing how the public can engage with that process. Maybe not, I'm not even suggesting tonight necessarily, but thank you.
Would you like to make a motion on the issue? We can.
Yes, thank you. I move to approve the early work package contract amendment for Skanska USA and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to, I have it right here. Approve the early work package contract amendment for Skanska USA and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents. Any discussion? I will read a short statement. Tonight's action is a phased, controlled step in the project delivery process. It allows early work to move forward while maintaining oversight and continuing to manage cost increases. And if we don't move forward tonight with this action, we would be subjecting the taxpayers to a potentially $1 billion increase by missing the dry season through mobilization. And our responsibility, I feel, as mayor and city council is to make decisions based on the best information available and the expert analysis while factoring in community input and balancing all of these considerations to do what we think is best for West Lynn. Because that's what we all want. That's why we're all here. And I'm sure that's why all community members were here, because we all care about West Lynn and want the project to be successful. So I feel confident based on what I've read. I've read the geotechnical report and spent some time with it and had a meeting with our staff about it. And I plan to enter this letter from the geotechnical engineer. It's part of the land use process, but I'm going to enter this into the record for the meeting tonight because it really does lay out all the extensive analysis that's been done to support the safety of the project. And I have confidence in the work based on what we heard from Mr. Callis today. So, and his company. So that's my comment. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight and consideration. Happy to open the floor up. Councilor Bonington.
Just real quickly, everyone along here lives in West Lynn. We are all people who love West Lynn passionately, probably the most of anyone here. We are the last people who want to build something that isn't going to last and something that is risky. We want to benefit from this, and we don't want to make decisions that will come back and have consequences for us as well. So it's worth keeping in mind when we make these decisions that we all live here as well.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Groner.
Thank you.
Please turn your mic on, please, if you can.
Thank you. I too was strongly supporting this. And I was struck by a couple of statistics that the original Norfolk site was constructed in 1937 when the population of West Lynn was approximately 2,000. Today, its population is 27,000, almost 30 times as big. And so we need a center. And it's time to get one.
Appreciate that, Councilor. Any other comments? All right, please call the roll.
Counselor Broner?
Yes.
Counselor Bonington?
Yes.
Counselor Bright?
Yes.
Council President Baumgartner?
Yes.
Mayor Villastamsky?
Yes. So the motion passes and the manager is authorized to proceed. And how many meetings has this been? This is the 17th public meeting?
This is the
So
17th.
Continuing to make progress, so.
Yes.
Thank you. 17th meeting on the Ops Center has concluded, and we'll move on to the next topic on the agenda. Would anybody like a short break? Just 2 to 5 minutes. All right, we'll take a two-minute recess.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of council.
Yeah, we appreciate all your time.
Thank you. We're in recess.
Only one person along here don't live in West Lynn, right? Only one.
2 minutes, take a break, and then get
Fine.
Lady B.
But the rest of us do, just him.
I was like, oh, I couldn't know.
Yes, he needs to move.
This was not ready. Okay, I'm starting to go. Yeah. Figure it's meeting. Also, I think they can none of these have been like important. I mean, those guys, how can I, you know, private explain about that? What's that? It's side of no, I'm some simulation of I thought. I mean, this is plus and big down. What I bring up so which that's I mean, we thought it's not, right? But we see that. But yeah, I have. It's
I told him half an hour to me.
All right. Yes, everybody's done.
I did.
So next tonight or why we get the big bucks.
He wants to stay. It's so interesting.
You know what? There's lots to talk about. Because.
You know, the lady bee that's still on the agenda.
Oh my gosh, I'm like getting hungry. I had a yogurt for dinner. Cause you know what it is? It's like you're not really hungry, but you know you have to eat something.
This slice of pizza in a second. Not. From home. Almost.
Well, regardless, it's probably more sustenance than my yogurt. Stayed in there longer.
What's your plate?
Tomorrow, like noon. So I just gotta go home and pack. I hope my clothes are all dry. I got up at 5 this morning to laundry. It's hard to unpack and repack when it's all their stuff.
Sorry, everybody. Everybody's waiting for the mayor.
All aboard.
We'll need an apology in writing this time.
Okay, everybody, are we ready to go?
Yes,
Are we waiting for Kaylee or is she?
we can go.
Okay. Well, we will return to the meeting. We're back in session. And this is the Westland City Council meeting Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. We're at agenda item 6C, the Lady B tugboat donation proposal, which is a follow-up to our last work session discussion where we decided we're going to make a decision. So, Mr. City Manager, do you have a staff report at all on this item or?
I do. At your discretion, I can go 1 minute or I could go 25 minutes.
Just take a
but-
minute.
Yeah,
Take
okay.
a minute. Let us know where we're at.
I figured
and
that
what
would be the answer. Mayor and council, and partially because you were just in work session on this topic last week with these fine folks from the advocates. You debated or discussed the options related to acceptance of this vote. We had a conversation about several items relating to risk that the city may or may not be taking on as part of this. We provided a little bit of extra information in the staff report, clarifying our insurance provider's position on this issue. The packet also includes, I wanted to point out, the packet includes a couple of drawings that we haven't seen in a while, illustrating this possible site and the sort of the cross-section display proposed by the advocates for this tugboat. So last week you discussed several of these pieces and you requested coming back to a business meeting in order to be able to make decisions. Considering the hour and the length of time you've been working already this evening, I will leave my staff report at that. We do have these folks from the advocates who have been here all evening getting educated on other topics and may have some additional thoughts. And I think, did you sign? We have, yeah, okay, great. So happy to have the advocates come up
Okay,
and
go ahead.
provide public comment, and then we can answer any questions you have.
Bring up the advocates. Thank you. And thanks for staying with us late in the evening.
Sandy Carter.
Sandy, welcome. Just state your name and city residence and go ahead.
Hi, my voice isn't very good tonight, sorry. I'm Sandy Carter. I lived here for 34 years, but I now live across the river.
Oh,
But I put a lot of investment into this town and I love it. And I don't know about the 3 minutes. Okay, I started on this in December of 2021, when I got a phone call from Bernard saying, we're going to scrap this boat. We know you like history. It's got a lot of history. Do you want to save it? And that's where the story started. I went through about 1,000 emails today. I was trying to do this timeline, but then I had a doctor appointment and I didn't have time to go pick it up on the way home. So I want to say that over the last 5 years, with some pretty considerable delays, because we were low priority, as John pointed out last week, the questions came up that came up last week. And we satisfied the liability with a checking on the umbrella coverage. We talked about the site plan, which we resent to you so you could be reminded that it will look like a small boat floating on the mowed grass on the berm in the park next to the restroom with a new sidewalk. We have established a budget that includes every single cost. So it's a donated boat. We pay for a consultant. And you know, we've just estimated all the costs, and it's a small project, actually. It comes in probably under 250,000, but we're putting in allowances in there for contingencies that might come up, because they usually do. I'd like to say that the boat has two values for sure. One is the actual historical value to the Willamette River history. This is the part of it that hasn't been told. Some of the supporters for the grants that I've gotten emphasize that this is like a secret to a lot of people who in the younger generations, including in West Linn, have never seen a tugboat pushing a log raft. And that's where we got started with the Bernard twins, moved to Willamette, started the Bernard clan, started the boat businesses, got their pay stubs down at Bernard Landing, and really established the city of the Willamette and a lot of jobs. So I wanted to say, the credibility of the advocates to help you pull this off has been proven. We've worked on other projects with the city. We got the grindstone sculpture at the trailhead there done with the city when Ken Worcester was Parks Director. And we would hope that by the time we raise all the money, which we have to do before you guys have to do anything, the Parks Department would have stabilized a little bit under new leadership. And we have a lot of allies in the historical community that can vouch for us. And I've got 10 seconds left. So I just urge you to please, this is very important to the community's global memory, as well as to the whole history of the state of Oregon, and particularly communities that live along the Willamette River between Salem and Portland. So thank you very much for all your time. And the fact that I had to repeat things is nobody's fault. It's just been 5 years.
Appreciate that. Appreciate your comments. Thank you, Sandy.
Alma Costin.
Alma, welcome back.
Sure, I'm. Good evening, council, and thank you for what you do. I'm Alma Costin. I'm from the Bolton neighborhood of West Linn. I came to West Linn in 1962, and I have lived at the corner of Hood and Burns, bought that property shortly after I moved here. I am advocating for the Lady B, but when I first came here, the Maddoxes were on their property, which is now Maddox Woods. And I encouraged them as they came to the age of doing something with their property to bequeath it to the city, because they wanted it to stay natural. And after that, we became friends of Maddox Woods. We got that going so that we advocate for Maddox Woods. But when I first knew the Maddoxes and was down there talking to them, the river was full of log rafts, tugboats. The Lady Bay was probably one of the tugboats there in front of their house. So through the years, I have seen the tugboats all along the river. You couldn't go to the river without seeing a tugboat. So anyway, I was on the Parks Board before 2000. And when the Maddoxes considered their property, I went off the Parks Board because I felt it was a conflict of interest if I was going to advocate for Maddox Woods. So anyway, through the years, knowing what the tugboats have been to all of us, I just hope that we decide to accept and advocate for the potential of history that is involved here with the Lady B, and this area has so much potential with the falls, with the locks, with all of the other things that I at times was involved with. I just hope that we capitalize on the potential that West Lynn has for all of the historic things there are. It takes a lot of work, but I know that it is worth it. So if you have any questions.
Any questions or follow-up? Council President Baumgartner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank you for all of the work you have done and all of the contributions you have made to the city and our community. And I really appreciate it. I love Maddox Woods, and I always think about the friends when I'm down there. So thank you.
Agreed.
I don't really have any questions, though.
Here, here.
Thank you.
Come down and join us every third Saturday to volunteer in the park.
Sounds good. I did in the past, I think, before, when I was
You have.
in the past.
That's where we met.
I remember that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Any other? Oh. Well, I just had a question. Say the city, we direct the staff to accept the tugboat and proceed forward with the proposal. Is there funding what was the funding situation with the actual, like the transfer of the boat and the funding for if funding wasn't able to be raised for the full on display, the potential disposal of the boat in the unfortunate situation, we do have to be clear-eyed about that. So what's the situation with that?
We do. The advocates have agreed to take on all costs that can be identified for the remediation of the tugboat and for the preparation of the site, including permit work, including hiring a construction manager to oversee the project. And so the memorandum of understanding that's proposed in your packet includes a phased approach. In the first phase, costs are identified, timelines are identified, needed expertise is identified, and then total cost is identified. And the advocates have agreed to do that two-phase funding to ensure the project can be funded. And they have also agreed that if the funding can't be raised, that the city is not required to retain the boat, and that it would be able to be disposed of.
So, it would remain, when would the ownership transfer happen to the city from the standpoint of the fundraising versus that timeline? Sorry to ask some.
No, that's
Just want to
okay.
make sure.
Yeah, so there are 3 legal questions that I have that were left over from the work session. But to your question, the way the MOU is structured right now is that we would not take legal ownership until the advocates have showed that they've raised the full amount, which right now is about $250,000. And so they would have raised that money first.
Okay.
Some of the issues, of course, making it all match up and all the different documents work together. The one question is about, whether you are comfortable accepting the Lady B as is, which is the Advocate and Wilsonville Concrete's proposal without any types of warranties or indemnification, which is what we would normally expect. So that's the outlying question, as well as whether you are comfortable accepting ownership of the tugboat after there's evidence that they've raised the full amount of funds, but before the lead abatement occurs. That's how it's currently drafted in the documents, that the city takes title to the boat while it is at Wilsonville Concrete's location. And so we own the boat before it has had all the lead abatement work, and then it will be done there at the yard and transferred to the city, park where the installation and design has already been completed. So that's how it's designed. I had flagged that as, do we want to take ownership of something where the abatement hasn't already occurred? But again, it really just goes into that question of, is this a project that the council wants to take on? And the final third flag that both staff and I had mentioned was the advocates said that they intend to raise funds, additional funds for 15 years of maintenance. But that's kind of a soft intent. And so we could make that more formal, that they do need to provide that. I think that's the major cost, is the ongoing maintenance and obviously the staff time.
Thank you for that overview of the situation. Happy to open the floor. I've spoken first tonight several times, so I'm going to open the floor up to council for deliberations. Councilor Groner and then Councilor Bonington.
Yeah, basically, I think we are all products of our history, and remembering our history is significant. We have, the history of this area includes the Native Americans. It includes the beaver. We don't have a beaver memorial anywhere. And it includes logging and paper, which were a very important part of our industry until very recently. So I think we need to remember that. And one way of remembering that is with monuments to that period that people can learn from and ask questions about. We just had a long discussion about risk with respect to the Operations Center. And I think a lot of that centered on, yes, people's discomfort with unknown risks and with professional assessments of what the risk is. And we've decided to go with the professional assessment of the risk. And I think there's somewhat analogous situation with the later B. There is some unease about potential liabilities, but the question is, what do we really know about those liabilities? And, I think if it's essentially buried up to the water line and we don't allow people to run on top of it one way or another, I think the risk is very low. I did ask a question, I'm not sure I've ever gotten an answer about, has our insurance carrier passed any judgment on this?
Yeah, I forwarded that this morning. She got back to us. So she said there are no limitations on liability coverage regarding the Lady B. She did mention, like I had shared at the work session, that there may be design elements that are required around the display to help mitigate, like you said, climbing on or being on the structure itself. And we also have confirmation in this email from underwriting that CIS would defend a liability claim. So your question about insurance is a good answer.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councilor Bonington. Sorry, I didn't mean to call on you. I thought you wanted to say something.
No, that's fine. I guess I'm thinking about the fact that quite a bit of Westland's history is just gone. Many of our actual historical ties have been demolished or hauled away to scrap, and there are a lot fewer, I think, than most other cities of our vintage. It's been kind of a treasure over the last few years, having been born and raised here and not having access to much of our history back during my childhood. A lot of it is starting to come back out again. It's being rediscovered. People are finding things, telling stories, and that's been really cool to see. I try to picture myself back in the time when these boats were on the water. And I wouldn't, I guess I can empathize with how it might be a very, very strange difference between that West Lynn and this one today. And continuing to tell that story and bringing that into the future for posterity does have some serious value. And I'm inclined to, I guess, continue allowing them the time to raise the money they need within the MOU and accept this without any warranties of safety.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other comments from council?
Sure, I'll go. Well, thank you again for staying and dedicating all of this time to this endeavor. When I first learned about the project, although I love history and exploring history, I had concerns that I expressed about the cost and the unknowns, basically, liability, et cetera. But I do think that I agree with what other council has said, that it's an endeavor worth undertaking, and I appreciate all the work that has been put in and is being promised to continue as far as the funding. Do we know how much the fundraiser made yesterday? Not yet. All right, not yet. Okay, so I would be happy to go forward in whatever way we agree on doing. I was just rereading the council options in here. So that's my 2 cents, is keep on sailing
Thank you, Council
or
President.
chugging.
Councilor Bright, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Not to be a downer, but I still don't really think this is something the city should own. I do believe it can be saved, but I'm also wondering if there is another way to honor that history without having a 40-foot boat. And as I said at the meeting last week, that goes from like the clock there behind the city attorney's head to that door. That's a very, very large object. I do like the way it's going to be kind of buried. I like that presentation. But I do think that maybe we could honor the history another way. I also have concerns with the amount of staff time that has already gone into this. And I recognize that the advocates are going to raise the funds to get it in place and all of that, but staff has already sunk a lot of time into it. We still don't have the final MOU, so that's going to be more time. And then if we need to fence it or do some other thing to make it less of a risk for people climbing on, then I also think that makes it less accessible as a historical thing. I was just walking through George Rogers Park in Lake Oswego, and they have a lovely little stone sculpture that kids used to climb on all the time, and it is now fenced with a sign saying, "Don't climb on it." So I'm not sure that that's what we want to see. So that's my perspective.
Counselor, I appreciate your comments, and you raised a lot of valid points about staff time and resources and everything. And I know there has been a lot of work that's gone into this, and this isn't at the top of the council's priority list when we go into goal setting. But we've been invested in the project for a while with the advocates, and for me, we're in a financial situation. I know as a city, we're kind of strapped for cash going forward, looking at budgets and working on these initiatives to do financial planning, and the budget outlook's bleak. So the fact that these advocates have been willing to come up with the full amount of the money to maintain and build the structure and keep this piece of history, I'm willing to give them a chance to do so, with the understanding that if fundraising can't come into place, the city is not going to be able, we're not in a budgetary situation to be able to dedicate resources to the project out of the budget. So that's why I'm willing to give it a chance on that, because I think there is some historical value in the boat, and there's some passion from dedicated members of our community. So it could be an interesting display. So that's where I'm at, but I also just recognize Counselor Brike's feelings, and you're not being a downer, you're being a realist and an important voice in the process. So we will. So anyway, I've kind of heard from the council. It sounds like there's a consensus. So should we make a motion and then give direction to?
Mayor, I would recommend a motion. We outlined a motion in the staff reports, basically directing us to return with the final documents and get the project going.
I can make a motion. Thank you, City Manager. I move to direct staff to return with final agreement documents for council approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to direct staff to return the final agreement documents for council approval. Any discussion? We've had discussion. Some places they want the motion first and then second and then discussion, but we do it a little differently here in West Lynn. So, Councilor Bonington, go ahead.
I guess I'd just point out that not everything we do needs to be cost effective or like part of any particular agenda. Sometimes preserving history is just fun and worth doing on its own.
Don't let the finance director hear you say that.
Well, she's not here.
Thanks, Counselor. With that, you can call the roll, please, for the final time. Busy night calling the roll tonight.
Council Brike?
No.
Council President Baumgartner?
Yes.
Councilor Groner?
Yes.
Councilor Bonington?
Yes.
Mayor Bilashowski?
Yes. So the motion passes 4-1. And we will continue forward and see what happens with the next steps. And thank you to the advocates for your passion for history. And I know you have an office in our historic city hall also. You're one of our tenants also. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the city manager report after a long evening and a good evening of hearing from the public and engaging with the community and making some difficult decisions.
I agree. Thank you, Mayor. We have a lot of work to do on the Operations Center. We've been doing a lot of work. The last few days have been very busy with all of that. And I appreciate the thought and attention you put into your review and decisions this evening. We have some next steps that you have directed us to do on all 3 of the business items, and we will get going on those right away. There were no agenda items planned for next week's work session, and given that you resolved all of these issues tonight, I would recommend that you cancel next week's work session for lack of agenda.
I have final exams next week, so I'm fine with that.
Okay.
And so it's given that there's no pressing city business on
Excellent.
the agenda. So
Yep.
Anybody have any agenda items they'd like to propose, or are we good to move into May?
In which case, our next meeting would be a work session on May 5th in the day. And given the hour, the only other thing I would like to report is the usual update on Framing Our Future. Lots of work happening there, a lot of internal work, but obviously 10,000 addresses received their Framing Our Future special issue of the OWL, and I'm very proud of the work that was done on the OWL, particularly by Danielle Choi and Doug Erickson, but all across the organization, departments have been putting work into that, and I think it's an amazing first step for this conversation process that you're asking to hold. It's going to provide information to the community about who we are and what we do, why we do it, and start setting the discussion for some of the challenges that we're facing. And that's what's going to be the next couple of months of discussion here in the community. So urge anyone who's still watching this evening to find that OWL in their pile and open it up and take a few minutes to take a look at it. It provides links to a really nice community discussion tool that's available on the Your West Lynn website. It's an opportunity for people to post comments, other folks to react. And council will be seeing, and the community will be seeing, a steady stream of information on our electronic news feeds as well about what the city does and about how we fund what we do. All per your direction on this work. So with that, I think I will wrap up for tonight. Kaylee, anything that you need to present? Okay, that's our report for tonight. Thank you for the work tonight.
Sounds good. And I'm sure we'll communicate next steps about the hearings officer decision and some more information on that.
Yes, we will put together a summary description of that. It's very straightforward, and we'll make it available to everyone who's interested.
Ideally, it can be in here too, and same process. Oh, well, Council President, we got letters from Congresswoman Bynum and just wanted to flag that our stormwater infrastructure project in the Bolton neighborhood has been submitted. She's supporting the project for a federal congressional funding grant. So we're hoping for good news from the appropriations process. So there's still money coming out of DC, maybe.
We hope there is. We very much appreciate Congresswoman Bynum's work on that. She did let me know that it's quite a long process from here. So it's just the beginning of what could be 6 to 12 months of deliberation in Congress before they approve anything in that vein. So we will see, and we'll certainly let the council community know if we hear of opportunities to support it.
It was great to go back and lobby for that, and so some good results. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for flagging that, Counselor. And thank you to the council and community for your dedication. And with that, we will adjourn and we'll be back in May. Thank you, everybody. Good night.